Right now, we are kicking off post-lunch with Yaron Velner from B Protocol, who will be discussing scaling the DeFi ecosystem securely with oracles. So yeah, give it up for Yaron.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. And yeah, we decided to go with a slightly different title in this talk. So the talk will describe how some kind of objective data putting up on a risk oracle could facilitate mitigation of the human factor and the risk that entails to it in risk management of DeFi protocols. DeFi entails with a lot of risk. Here the talk is pretty focused into one specific application. In lending markets, there are a lot of risks, also around smart contract risks and other. But one of the key risks is that eventually a borrower will not repay his loan. And for this purpose, there are so-called loan-to-value ratios, collateral factors, collateral ratios. It's kind of all used in around DeFi, which is basically how much, for example, USDC you are allowed to borrow versus ETH collateral, for example. And these are highly dependent on the asset type, the situation of the platform, etc., where eventually the core goal is to ensure liquidations, which are the core of the play a key role in ensuring the solvency of a lending market. So we want to mitigate the human factor, but over the last year plus, we are also kind of taking part in this human-driven risk analysis. We provided consultation and services to a bunch of projects. This is something we did via our risk DAO, service DAO, and with B protocol. For over 2 years, we are trying to improve as a protocol the liquidation process. So we are coming from the trenches there and trying to build a solution that will make things more scalable, but also, like in the context of this talk, also less political, less human-driven. And risk management, economic risk management, has a very notorious history of, being politically biased and, kind of dubious line of work. Some hold it responsible, already to the 2008 credit crisis, which, kind of gave rise to the emerging of entire crypto and Bitcoin, of course, that followed it. And then, of course, okay, so this is traditional finance. We have crypto, and, like in the recent crashes, we saw Genesis Trading went insolvent, mostly because they didn't want to liquidate 3 Arrow Capital because they held Grayscale Bitcoin. And Grayscale Bitcoin was promoted by one of the parent companies of Genesis Trading. So, we can only guess if it was like sort of a pure trading decision not to liquidate, if they had hidden agenda. Of course, FTE exposing liquidations to Alameda lead to, $10 billion of insolvency. And we see it also in regulated DeFi. So this is an example where the London Metal Exchange decided to pause trading, and as a coincidence, one of the biggest whale there went through liquidation, and we can only guess why they decided to do, and like the timing of that. But this is all like in TradeFi, right? Everything is centralized. We are in DeFi. This will never happen there, right? But kind of the reality now in DeFi is that most of these lending platforms are served more as an on-chain banks or decentralized brokers, and not really as kind of a permissionless self-executing protocol. This is a proposal from Aave Forum in the weekend that USDC lost the peg. So the proposal there is to actually stop liquidations across all the avalanche markets. And this proposal was, actually was given by an objective, third-party risk vendor by Gantland. And this proposal might even make sense, but the second you give the, kind of the power to a DAO to decide if they want to stop liquidations, you give them all the freedom to change kind of arbitrarily risk parameters, right? So like the road into, insolvency, kind of resembles more of what we see in traditional finance, right? Posing liquidations is exactly what FTX did. I mean, here, of course, the intents are completely different. But still, as a user, right, you have no idea what will happen tomorrow, what the DAO will decide, what kind of consideration they have, etc. More generally, configuring risk parameters. So we all like to present it as something which is like a quantitative quantitative process based on hard facts and market conditions. But there's a lot of domain-specific knowledge here, a lot of politics and risk-reward considerations, where like eventually the end user has no idea what is happening, kind of behind the scene, and it's not any different also in DeFi. So our plan and what we are working on is to do it differently. We are working on a smart contract system, which is completely self-executable, that just take this quantitative data as an input with some risk appetite or confidence factor that every protocol can decide on themselves, and then output this minimum collateral ratio or minimum loan-to-value ratio. And this will both automate the process and as a byproduct eliminates like all the uncertainty around it. And the outcome might not be as optimal as having maybe Gantland managing your risk, but the analogy here and the vision is definitely, for example, Uniswap formula, where a simple formula kind of took the lead in market making, kind of not really defeating professional market makers, but just providing a better value proposition of certainty, transparency, etc. So also here, this kind of system will be able to bring lending markets to be more, like again, like part of the actual DeFi ecosystem, and not only like on-chain finance, where eventually, a lot is going on like behind the hoods. So yeah. So for that, in the risk DAO, we came up with a first, formula on how to calculate and recommend these loan-to-value ratios. The overall goal, eventually, we will have, like a set of formulas for different use cases. I won't go too much into the formula, but basically, it takes like a bunch of sort of objective parameters, such as volatility, DEX liquidity, borrow caps, but also give room to a special C factor, which is kind of the risk appetite of this platform, right? So in kind of economic risk, unlike in cyber security risk, it's perfectly fine, like to take extra risk, but as long as you are transparent about it and let your user know. So we just launched it on testnet. On testnet, you can actually play with the smart contracts, can see the outputs that the formula give, but also what the smart contract is giving. Right now, we aggregate the data only from few selected DEXs, but we are obviously we will extend it. The vision is to eventually have like a set of relayers and validators. Of course, on testnet, we only have one. And then the core of the system is a smart contract, which is sort of an oracle with all the data we aggregate. And then the smart LTV formula on the bottom is just one instance of calculating, in this case, loan-to-value ratios. But we plan to build more applications on top of it later. Another byproduct here is that this formula takes the risk appetite as an input, but we can also do reverse engineering of the process. And this smart contract can now analyze, giving the loan-to-value ratios of, for example, a compound in this case. We can just, the smart contract will be able to say what is the risk appetite that compound took in each of these assets. And having it on-chain can give rise to, like a set of on-chain strategies, for example, that will decide where to put user funds in a more trustless way, right? So like in this way, like the strategy manager delegates the trust to the Oracle results. Yeah, and definitely what we see, like it's only live on tested now, but there's a vision in the future, loan-to-value ratios will be determined automatically, with or without circuit breakers from the DAO, with some maybe the DAO will only have to decide on some risk appetite, but this eventually delegates a lot of the trust that now users have to have on, for example, other risk management and, like more generally on a new protocol risk management. So this delegated trust into a more, like cold, objective data with some processing layer. And this is a real issue, for new lending markets and DeFi platforms, because eventually you can fork, Aves code or compound code, but you cannot really fork the trust in the team. And here with some Oracle, you can really delegate this trust, basically to a smart contract. Another issue is, of course, like the whole listing process, right? So, and again, like one of the main concerns, other than bugs in the code, is that lending market operators will do stupid stuff when listing a new asset, because eventually in the current architecture, it's kind of the case that the weakest asset determines the kind of the risk of the entire platform, right? It's kind of like the weakest link model. So again, having it on-chain means that either a DAO can delegate, some of the decisions into potentially like a smaller group that will be guarded by a smart contract, or alternatively also delegate everything into a smart contract and then become fully permissionless and only based, like on cold facts and data. This also kind of fits well in the trend of now trying to delegate more responsibility into users, having them manage their own risk, and users still typically not being very experienced in these kind of things can benefit from such an Oracle system. Yeah, so basically, we try to address the issue is that right now lending markets are very different than the rest of DeFi, because while rest of DeFi is kind of a stupid or at least neutral layer that just execute a piece of code, lending markets have a lot of decisions that are taken by humans and have effect not only on some liquidity mining parameter, but also on the actual solvency of the system and touch user funds. So with such risk Oracle system, we can have lending markets again use the go back to the DeFi ethos of being neutral, automated, self-executed, transparent, and of course decentralized. Yeah, so this is an ongoing work, right? By the B protocol, which is the data layer. RiskDAO is kind of our research arm. We are looking, to collaborate, obviously with lending markets, but also with other researchers. B protocol will facilitate, like any formula there that is reasonable. So yeah, if you're interested to learn more, reach out to us either on Twitter or in our website. And yeah, thank you very much.